we're going to talk to Tom Burdick, who's the CEO of Bioprocess Engineering, and we're going to speak to him about the challenges of taking over a family-owned business and running a business that is a distributor.
Enabling Success for Founders and Entrepreneurial Businesses, hosted by Toby Harper.
Tom, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this podcast. To get started, why don't you tell us a bit about your role and introduce us to the business briefly?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. BPS was founded in 1996 by my father. It was set up as a distribution company. So we work almost exclusively in biotech. And within that niche, there's biopharma, which is obviously medicines, things like that. But lately, we're moving more towards industrial biotechnology as well, things like biofuels, and then latterly as well, alternative proteins, so feeding people in a sustainable way.
Okay, brilliant. And there's quite an interesting story behind the business getting started, wasn't there? Which your father was in a relatively unique position.
Yeah, that's right. So he was running a biotech company or a manufacturing company in the biotech sector, probably from the 80s. And he'd done it for a few different companies. He'd spent a lot of time building these businesses. But eventually he was made redundant in 1995 or 1996. And he thought, you know what, it's about time I run a business for myself. So he set up Bioprocess Engineering. He had a really good list of contacts, some really good relationships with the industry. And he had the opportunity through those contacts also represent a number of very interesting new products onto the market. So he decided, it's time to set it up. So it was just himself initially selling and supporting these instruments in our market.
And what about you then? So how did you get involved in the business? Was it your dad wrangle you into it, or how did that come about? What was the plan?
I don't think he wrangled me as such, but he definitely made me an offer. So I was working as a project manager. So my background is engineering. So as trained engineer, I've been working for 4 years as a project manager and project engineer for a manufacturing company, and that was loosely based on pharmaceuticals as well. So I knew a bit about the industry, and I had the opportunity to take redundancy from that role. The company was struggling. So my dad made me an offer to join and to work with him. I didn't really know at the time whether that would be for a few weeks, a few months, a few years, or as it turned out, a few decades.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how we really got started together. He was very much running the company and I was very much the employee. And we had a couple of other people working with us at the time. So there were 3 or 4 of us for most of that time.
And when did you take over then, Tom?
So I would say it's about 10 years ago. Around the same time, I became the majority shareholder. So I've had shares for the majority of the time I've been with BPS. Probably within a couple of years, I had a few shares, and then it changed to the majority stake. I think about 2011, 2012. And at that point, it felt appropriate that I would be running the sort of day-to-day of the business. He was still actually in charge of a lot of the sales at that point, but I was running the day-to-day.
And how has the sort of the business changed since you took it over, and I guess essentially been able to put your own stamp on things? Have you found that there's sort of been a different approach in sort of running it and different ambitions for it, or? I
would say so. I would say the market has changed, well, for everybody, but I think in particular biotech and biopharma over the last 10 years or 10 to 15 years, the market's changed a lot. It became clear to me pretty much starting to run the business on a day-to-day basis, the conversations I was having with people. We deal with multinational companies every day, and being a tiny company within that sector is a bit tough. And I don't think it's always necessarily taken as a good thing that you're a family business. I think there are a lot of advantages to it, but I think a lot of big companies don't necessarily see that. I was quite keen, although I'm very proud of it being a family business. I'm very proud of what my dad achieved with it. I was keen for us to not be seen as a family business. I don't hide from it. I'm very open about it, but But I think attracting the right suppliers and being taken seriously by our customers, we needed to have a slightly different approach. I also wanted to attract, when I wanted to expand, we haven't expanded hugely, but we are expanding and continue to expand. And I was very keen to attract the right people. And I think, some people are attracted to family business and a lot of people aren't. And I didn't want that to be a barrier. I wanted people to think they could come and join and one day end up running the business. That was my goal.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I guess from the perspective of a prospective employee, thinking that they're joining a family business, so they sort of immediately think there's probably going to be a glass ceiling, isn't there, to the opportunities for progression.
Yeah.
But what about your customers? Why do you think they've got your customers or your suppliers? Why do you think they would have an issue dealing with a family-owned business? And I was quite interested that when we were talking before, that there's a slightly different perspective taken in the US market to family-owned businesses, isn't there?
Very, very.
And I was quite interested in that and why that might be.
Yeah, it seems to be very different culture in the US. And it's quite common to have very large family-owned, family-run businesses, and we work with a few, and it's brilliant. I'm not knocking it at all. I think they do a great job.
I can understand from a prospective employer's perspective that they might be hesitant or have some reluctance to join a family-owned business because of the potential of there being a glass ceiling for them.
Sure.
But what about your suppliers and your customers? It doesn't seem to make sense to me that they would necessarily have an issue dealing with a family-owned business. What are the things that you hear from them and the reasons for that? How are you dealing with that? And I was also quite interested in when we talked before about the US market, and it seems to be a quite a different approach to dealing with family-owned businesses.
There are some huge family-run businesses in the UK, JCB being one of them. But we're a tiny company, and I think the assumption that people can make, maybe I'm oversensitive, but the assumption that people can make is that you haven't got there on merit. It's just a rite of passage. You've got old enough, your dad's retired, therefore you're now running the company. And I guess there is some truth in that, but it's not all we're about. In the US, I don't think they have that attitude. We work with a couple of US companies who are family-owned, family-run businesses. It's brilliant working with them. I don't have any issues at all. But I just felt that being such a tiny company in our market where our customers are big players, it's not always seen as a positive. And although I don't hide from it, it's not something that we would promote.
But you are trying to make positive steps to a degree to try and move the perception away from the business being family-owned. How would somebody who's in a similar situation to yours, experiencing similar issues, what are the things that they can do that maybe you're doing to try and distance yourself from that connection, that family-owned connection?
I think it's quite difficult, particularly if you are small, because if you're a family-owned and family-owned shareholders, those people are all going to want to have key positions within the organisation and a say, which makes sense. So, although we have been a family-owned business, we are moving away from that. So I will be the only shareholder of BPS going forwards. But what I would say is it all comes down to the people. So I'm finding myself less and less as the face of the business, and we have a sales team now that are actively in front of our customers. So, okay, a lot of our customers know me and know BPS as me, but I'm trying to change that and say, no, BPS is a company that's full of professionals that can offer you great service. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And I think by getting the right talented individuals in place, we'll do that.
You can do that. I was also interested. So the business is, you're a distributor, aren't you?
Yeah.
And that leaves you in a particularly vulnerable position, doesn't it? Can you tell us a bit about that?
It can do. So we have had a few cases in the life of the company where we've been overexposed with one supplier, because you have a good product, it's selling really well, and you run with it. You're not going to turn away sales. But what can happen is you turn around, and if you don't grow with it and continue to grow the business with that income, you can be very overexposed. We've had a couple of cases where it's happened to us that the customer's been bought out. So the supplier has been bought out, and they've already got their own. The company that's bought them have already got their own sales team in place, and there's suddenly no need for us, even though we have contracts, we have a year or whatever buyout time, but you're still very exposed to try to build a replacement for a business, for a product which is potentially 30-40% of your business in a year is almost impossible. It takes us normally 2 or 3 years to get products to a point where they're generating really nice income for us.
Wow. So what can you do? What can you do to try and sort of insulate the business from those risks, which sound like in some cases they could be completely catastrophic?
Well, it's about managing the risk. Exactly. So we're very fortunate now that our portfolio is really nice and balanced. So we have different products in different parts of their life cycle anyway. So that just happens. So we're always trying to bring new products in that we think are going to be really interesting to our customers, while maintaining and managing our existing portfolio. But it's a challenge to make sure that you're not overexposed, for sure.
Yeah. What about developing your own products? I mean, is that a silly suggestion? Is that something that you've ever considered before? Is that a potential?
It's always a potential. I think because of the market we're in, it would be frighteningly expensive to do. Although we are capable of doing our own sort of prototyping, our team isn't made up of salespeople. It's made up of biologists, bioprocess engineers, and engineers. So we potentially have the knowledge to do it, but we don't really have the experience to do it. And it's not our core business. I think it would involve a lot of expansion and a lot of risk. And I've got to be honest, I think there are people out there that could do it better than.
So your background is you were an engineer, weren't you? And now you've taken over this family business. You're running it. It's a small business. I imagine there's lots for you to do, all sorts of different challenges. How do you sort of cope with that? Not coming from a sort of a business background to running a small but growing business that you have ambitions to continue to grow. What's that like day to day? And
I enjoy it. I guess that's the first thing I should say. So if you enjoy something, you're likely to put a bit more effort into it and get some more out of it. I am an engineer. I think that gives me a certain sort of practicality. I'm quite a logical person. So I feel that what I try to do is create the culture of the firm. It may sound a little bit corny, but from that, I think if you've got quite a strong culture and you lead by example and you have a collaborative approach, I think, and you choose your people well, and they adopt that, I wouldn't say it runs itself from an administration point of view, but from a team point of view and people pulling in the right direction, it does. I've always been very hands off. I really don't enjoy micromanaging people. People have objectives and they know what they need to achieve. It's a challenge sometimes letting them achieve it the way they want to achieve it rather than the way that I would necessarily achieve it. But I have this hands-off approach that so far, it seems to be working quite well.
And obviously, in terms of achieving the growth that you want, do you have a vision for how your role might evolve and the sort of the impact that you might have as that role evolves in different areas?
It's difficult to look too far into the future. I have ambitions for the company, and at the moment we are still a tiny company. We're 8 people. I want to double that in the next 2 or 3 years. And I think we can do it quite comfortably without taking too much risk. In terms of my role, it will become more and more admin-based and less customer focused. What's really important to me is that I have extremely strong relationships with our suppliers, because one of the challenges that we find, as a distributor, you said you can lose a chunk of your business almost overnight through no fault of your own. So we have our customers that we have to sell our products to, and that has its own challenges, but we have to keep our suppliers happy too. So there's 2 sides of the coin.
Fighting on 2 fronts.
Yeah, which is great. And I think we offer a similar value proposition to both. But I see my role as really making sure that our suppliers, we're achieving what they need us to achieve. And those relationships are as good and strong as they can be, because although some of our suppliers are very small companies, some of them are huge multinationals employing tens of thousands of people. And you have a different relationship with those organizations, and it's good fun. And I enjoy that side of it.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. So you preserve the product portfolio that sells well, continue to build it, and stay close to the suppliers.
Yeah.
I can imagine that being a really vital role as the business continues to grow.
Absolutely.
And finally, what's one thing that you do as a business leader that contributes the most to your success?
Without wishing to sound corny, I would hope it is giving my team the space and the support and the tools that they need to do their job and to do their role and to grow. Because I think, the business is its people, particularly the business that doesn't have products. It's, our own products. The relationship that we have with our suppliers and customers is critical. So making sure that we can maintain that by empowering the staff to do it that's a key part of what I do.
Great, that makes sense, Tom. Thanks a lot for joining us on this podcast. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful and informative. Please follow us, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.